everyone. Thank you for watching this video. In this video, we are going to talk about how to add GCS as a data source in Accelerator Data Observability platform. So to start with, in this session, we're gonna talk about GCS use cases that we have seen with different customers in Accelerator, and then followed up by the enterprise data stack example that basically resembles with what different stacks that we have seen, and then the next topic would be the architecture of the product, basically very high level, and what are the high level components of the product, and then which component connects to the GCS data source, and followed up by the prerequisites that are required from an architecture standpoint and from the setup of this data standpoint, of this data source standpoint. So and then at the end, we're going to also look at the demo of this integration. So where do you go into the product, and how do you get started with this? So we'll cover that as well. So let's get started. So GCS basically it stands for Google Cloud Storage, which is a object storage platform which is highly scalable and durable. It stores structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data sources, data that could be your backup files or your log files, your media files, data lake foundations, and whatnot. Accelerator helps in doing the data observability for structured and semi-structured data as of now, right? And any data that gets stored in like any semi-structured or structured data, the user can connect to those buckets and check for the quality and do the data observability thing. So it offers multiple storage classes, global availability, and seamless integration with Google Cloud Analytics services as well. And as we have seen GCS with getting used by different customers for different purposes. So, for example, we have customers in different line of business. For example, financial services, CPG, telecommunication, pharma, and healthcare. So all of these companies, they use GCS to basically store uh, transactional data. For example, financial company, they use transactional archives, right? To store transactional archives, raw financial data, regulatory backups. Similarly, CPG companies use it to store supply chain data, sales data, inventory data, and whatnot. And similarly, telecommunication companies use it to store CDR, like call records, telemetry data, media files, and similarly, pharma and healthcare companies, they store clinical trial documents, patient records, research data, and similarly, uh, there are different other companies who are our customers. They store such data in GCS. So all of these different companies, they have a very common stack. Either that would be called as the hops of that pipeline would be called as landing, enrichment, or and consumption, or that would be called as a Mendelian architecture, right? So, but the essence remains the same. So you will have the all the data sources from the data actually is getting generated or where the data comes from, like RDBMS or apps or streamings, file and object storage as well, and then on-prem data lakes, right? So when the data goes from on-prem to on-cloud, so those sources, so you will have all the sources on the left, and then you will have some hops into the pipeline, which will be managed by the ETL jobs. And then all the way right, you will have the dashboards, the ML and the AI engines, right? Which will basically connect to the consumption layer of the pipeline, right? And it will it basically helps the user to drive some business insights on the consumption layers data, right? But you will also see landing and enrichment kind of hops, right? So what usually happens when the data comes from these sources, it first lands to the landing layer, right? And that landing layer are generally a file storage object storage data sources, right? For example, GCS is one of that, right? And then from GCS, in usual cases, what we have seen from GCS, yeah, the data goes to the data may come from Kafka, and then from Kafka to GCS, and then from GCS, it can go to BigQuery. Right? In usual cases, it goes to BigQuery to get enriched. So the enrichment gets done by the ETL job, but in the next hop, it gets stored into the BigQuery tables. And after enrichment, when it's get ready for consumption, it gets stored into the next hop of BigQuery, right? So this is a kind of similar, a very common example that we have seen with customers. So customer finally connects to BigQuery table, which is of consumption, and draw the business insights. But what if I tell you that if the data of the consumption layer is bad, right? So all of the business insights that you draw on the from the dashboards, the BI dashboards or ML and AI outputs are not going to be reliable into the real time market, right? So or how would you check the quality, right? So you can only check the quality of the consumption by connecting to the consumption data sources. But what if I tell you, if you identify something in consumption, a bad data, right, and you want to fix it, so fixing or applying a remediation on the consumption layer is a lot more expensive than in terms of time and cost uh, to fix that basically on the consumption. Whereas, which is fairly a reactive approach. Whereas if you want to take a proactive approach, if you want to fix the data before it lands to the consumption, that you would need to connect to either enrichment, and even before, if you want to take a proactive measure, then you would need to connect to the landing layer, right? And in your landing, you have the data in GCS, not in BigQuery. So if you want to, let's say, make sure that your schema standards are at least matched in the landing hop of the pipeline, right? Into the landing layer. So you would require to connect to a GCS bucket to make sure your or just to check that your schema standards are correct for your data. So now, how to connect to this data source is basically Accelerator has a list of connectors, and GCS is one of that. And you can use the UI to basically connect, but you will need some prerequisites before setting up that integration, and that is what we are going to talk about today in the demo. So before I go into the demo, let me also talk about the architecture of the product, right? And which will also help you understand which is the component that actually connects to the GCS data source, and what whitelisting is required from a security standpoint. Uh, yeah, so that will really help. So So there are two parts of the product, which is basically listed here. The first part of this software is the control plane, right? Which is completely hosted and managed by Excel Data. It has a UI through which the user interacts, and the user creates policies through the UI. That policy configuration gets stored in the control plane databases, right? And the second part of the product, which is the data plane, which is the second part of the same software, right? Which is basically the data plane. It gets deployed into the customer's environment. It gets deployed into the customer's Kubernetes cluster, right? So since it is getting deployed in customers' environment, basically customers' VPC, Accelerator helps in deploying, but customers owns basically the accountability for maintaining the cluster and upgrading the cluster and all of that. So So the first part is the control plane, the second part is the data plane. Why is the data plane in the customer's VPC is basically because this data plane is the one which gets the registered connectivity to your GCS data sources or to any data sources, right? So once this connection is registered, uh, what uh, what happens basically when the user submits the job or the policy from the UI, so that policy basically goes to the data plane in the form of Spark job. So it runs as a Spark job on this Kubernetes cluster where the data plane software is deployed. So the next step here would be it will basically read the data from the GCS bucket. It will bring the data to the data plane. It will observe the data in this Kubernetes cluster pod. And once the job is completed, it will send the metadata to the control plane, right? And what metadata that it sends is basically how many rows it has scanned, how many good records are there, bad records are there, how many rules that it has scanned, and with what percentage those rules have passed those certain list of records, right? So all of that data goes to the control plane so that the user can see it on the UI. And we have different dashboards to slice and dice all of that matrices as well. And but what happens to the data here? So you can, after observing the data, so the pod gets deleted, but before deleting the pod, the data can be stored for remediation purpose as well. It can be stored into any storage bucket as well, right? So that the customer can also reference what are their good records or bad records of the GCS bucket that they were looking at. So that's about the architecture. So what you need to make sure is before setting up this connection is just that you need some uh, GCS details is basically project name and the bucket name. So project name is basically under which your all of the buckets are present, and bucket name is basically where your all of the files are stored, right? So you need the project name and the bucket name and the authentication mechanism. So to authenticate, we can use the Google workload identity to authenticate to the project name and the bucket names, or we can use the credential file, right? So so these are the two things, and one whitelisting is also required, as I said. This will be a registered connectivity, and we're going to see how to register that connection. But before registering this connection, we need to make sure that this connection is whitelisted. So the data plane is able to communicate with the GCS bucket or GCS project name. In order to check a detailed documentation from Accelerator, you can always go to this link here, and this will have this has basically the prerequisites in detail, and then what are the steps that you need to perform based on whether you want to go through Google workload identity or a JSON credential file, which is basically service account file, right? And what are the different options that are here? And once you complete that, how to start the crawler and what does the crawler brings. So we're going to talk about that, but all of those are also mentioned here over the documentation side. Coming back, so from here, I'll take you to the platform to show you the demo of this integration. So this is the page landing page where the setup of the data sources starts. So you have an option on the right side here to basically add the data source. Once you click on it, you will get the option to select the data source type. So Accelerator has around 45 plus connectors available to connect the customer data sources, and GCS is one of that. So you select GCS, and then you need to provide the name of the connection, some description, which is optional, and enable data reliability and select a data plane, which is already installed, right? So that's basically part of the infrastructure setup. And this data plane is something that I'm highlighting here in this slide. Yeah. So once this is created, this will be available in this list here. Let me show you a connection which is already created. So if I just edit the configuration here, so this is the name of the connection, data reliability is enabled and the data plane is selected. Then I go next from here. So I have the option to enable or to authenticate through Google Workload Identity or through the credential file. Once you enable that, you will have to perform uh, other steps. So here I'm showing you using the credential file, right? So uh, then you'd also need the project name to be provided here and the bucket name to be provided here, and what monitoring channel do you want to use, right? So if you want to provide multiple bucket names, so this is one project name. Under that, you have this bucket and the another bucket, right? Similarly, you can always add more buckets to the same data source configure, same data source bundle, right? And then once these details are filled in, so you can click on test connection, which which sends a authentication request to the to a GCS. And if this connection is successful or your JSON file is correct and the buckets and those project names are present there, so it will say that the connection is set up. Not the connection is set up, but the authentication is set up. And then the next page here is basically to add the assets. So you may have 100, 200, 500 assets which are important and which are not very important for you to monitor, right? So in order to add only the directories that you want to monitor in the configuration setup here, right? So you can create or you can mention those path expression which you want to monitor and just say what kind of, so this is the path expression, right? And at the end it is a star because I want to monitor all the files which are present under this source directory, and what kind of file types which are present here. So those are my CSV files. Accelerator supports other file type format as well, right? And then what is the delimiter that's provided into these CSV files, right? And you can name this asset, right? So for example, this is for like clinical trials or something like that, right? So likewise, we have named it here client's contract, right? And client contracts contract sync, right? So you can name your assets as well, right? Uh, so you can either, if you have a good naming convention for your data, for your data directories, right, you can use the same connection name here to be provided here, or you can tweak the names as well. So once all of these details are provided, you can add any number of connections from here, and then at the end you can basically enable, or you can just submit to start the crawler. Once you click on submit, the connection gets saved and it will give you a prompt whether you want to start the crawler. I'll talk about what crawler is, but let me also cover this option here first. This is an option to schedule the crawler job, right? So when you click on submit, it gives you a prompt and that only runs for the first time. But when you enable this option and provide a frequency here to trigger this job, it will basically run the same crawler job with the frequency that you provide here, right? But what crawler job is basically it connects to all of these directories, right? There is a job which basically which connects to this directory and fetches the metadata out of it, right? So by looking at the CSV file, it will basically say that okay, how many files that it has looked at, right? Or basically there are how many connections that I have created: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, around 7, right? So it will say that the platform is basically connecting to 5 directories, right? And those files has these many columns, and these are the name of those columns. So this is a metadata that it brings to basically to our catalog page. And then if you want to get a notification if the crawler phase, you have the option to set up the notification channel. If you want to get notified even in the case of successful run of the crawler, then also you can enable this option. I'm not enabling this for now. And once I click on submit, I'll show you that. One second. Once I click on submit, it will give me a prompt that whether you want to run a full crawler or a selective run, right? So I'm not running it right now because I have already run it, and I can show you how does it look like when the crawler has already completed, right? So I ran this crawler around an hour back, right? So it was a full run of the crawler. And what are the details that it has fetched is basically once you click on this, you'll say that, okay, full crawler ran 1 hour ago, right? The data source was created at on this day, and this is when the health check was done. And this is the metadata. So it is connecting to seven file directories, and there are a total of 107 columns, right? So if you click on this seven files, so it will show you the same name that you have given in the configuration page. So client contract and client contract sync, right? So we saw these two names, right, that we have given in the configuration. So now it also says that uh, your files that you have in these directories has a reliability score of this percent, right? Now, how does Accelerator gets to know about the reliability score, or how does Accelerator say this is the reliability score? Is basically by running policies. So you can also see that it has certain policies configured, right? Some three data quality policies configured, two reconciliation policy configured, a freshness policy, a anomaly detection policy, and there are some other details as well that it captures, right? So by running these policies and looking at each record based on the rules that the user has defined, finally the score of any asset comes into the catalog page, right? And it also shows if there are any open alerts, if there are any tags identified by running the profiling, if there is any automatically there is any tag that has been identified, PII data that has been identified. So we show those tags here as well. So, which I think we can talk about that into a different video. How do we capture in detail? How do we capture this reliability score? But we wanted to show you how to connect GCS as a data source. So, coming back to the slide here. So what we just did is we started from the register page. We selected GCS as a data source, and then we named the connection, enabled data reliability, and selected the data plane uh, that basically we have created as part of infrastructure setup. Then we provided the credential file. Workload identity is the other option, but I showed you with credential file. We provided the bucket name and the project name. We provided two bucket names, right? And we provided the data sets that we want to connect, and then once we submitted the connection, the configuration gets saved and the crawler job starts, which gives you a prompt, or you can also schedule this crawler job. Once the crawler job completes, we have verified the crawler status that it is completed, right? It was completed an hour ago. And we also explored how many assets that we are connected with, what are the scores, how does it look like on the UI. So that's what we did today. Yeah. So thank you for watching this video.